The other day, my friend and I were headed into town to pick up some groceries in his beat-up Volvo station wagon. We heard a siren coming behind us, so we pulled over to make way for a fire truck barreling at top speed down the highway. I watched as it approached a light up ahead. It was a red light, and when it reached the light, it went straight through. It went straight through because on the other side there were people who needed them. An ambulance would do the same thing if people were bleeding to death. And Martin Luther King Jr. says that there are people bleeding to death from social or economic wounds all over the world, waiting on a brigade of ambulance drivers to run the red lights until the emergency is solved. You see, the truth is there are fires of injustice raging in our world. And there are children, walking miles every day just to get to water that when they drink it, it will ultimately kill them because it's unclean. Or there are people dying because of diseases that we have the resources to prevent. See, and the sad part is that even while 26,000 plus children are dying every single day simply because they're hungry, we're conservatively driving cars instead of fire trucks. See, and perhaps the even greater travesty is that many of us have come to believe that only a few are uniquely called to put out the fire. Friends, if your building is on fire, you toss water on it. Don't pray for someone else to bring a bucket of water. See, I think many of us, when seeing its condition, want to change the world. But how do you go about feeding 26,000 hungry children? You find 26,000 Christians to act like Christ and feed them one at a time. I've come to see that the best way to change the world is to change who you are to it. Not too long ago, I sold everything to live on the streets with the poor, and shortly after that, I started a movement called Clothe Your Neighbor as Yourself. For every shirt purchase, we clothe someone in need. For us, however, it's not so much about clothing as it is redefining neighbor. Loving your neighbor as yourself is one of Jesus' greatest commandments, so what better pursuit is there than being a good neighbor? We would be wise to take a look at the early Christians who were commonly referred to as the Way, because what set them apart wasn't just what they believed, but the way that they lived and the things that they did. And this should carry massive implications on a Christian culture defining themselves by what they don't do and who they are not. It's disquieting to find so many people sitting comfortably in church pews and hidden behind stained glass windows when what Jesus calls of all of his followers got him killed. But what does it mean to follow? I think a lot of us end up only admiring Christ instead of truly following him. But admirers are only linked to the admired through the thrill of the imagination. But followers end up doing as the leader does. And in an attempt to look like Jesus, we've simply not looked like the world, but very little like Christ. Our obedience has been defined by what we don't do, when our obedience should be defined by what we do for the world our God so loved. You see, God loves the world. So a Christian does too. But to reach the world, we need not to become big, but small. Because when we need less, we can give more. And because we've given to those in need, they now need less for themselves and can give more too. Mother Teresa knew what it meant to become small. Even on her deathbed, she gave one of the greatest lessons she ever gave throughout her whole life. A few days from death, and Mother Teresa she couldn't rationalize dying in a bed while others didn't have the luxuries and had to die on the streets. So, like Jesus ditching a throne for a cross, she crawled right out of her bed and onto the floor to die on the carpet. This lends a whole new meaning to love your neighbor as yourself, which is often written off as a fresh perspective on poverty rather than an intentional mandate for the church. No, you may not be able to provide beds for everyone, but we can certainly join them on the floor. After all, isn't that who Jesus was? Wasn't he God joining us on the floor? You may not be able to feed everyone, but we can feed one person at a time. This is the way of God, and everyone is welcome, and everyone is called. Because when the world is full of average people doing small things in the name of Jesus, the world will be different. I feel like we should do an altar call or something, but we won't be saying a superstitious prayer. This altar call will be characterized by altering oneself from the patterns of the world to create new and better ways of living. So instead of having you bow your head and close your eyes, I submit to you, keep your head up, your eyes open, unfold your hands, and let's get started.